Shalom and welcome to a new podcast from Med Israel for Fred. MIF is the largest non-religious, non-partisan pro-Israel group in Europe, defending Israel in Norway, Denmark, Sweden and Iceland. Usually we communicate in the Scandinavian languages, but in our video archives on YouTube and Facebook you will also find numerous interesting interviews and lectures in English. So have a look and make sure you subscribe and get the notifications of future live streams. And as you know, the like button is not far away from you. 50 years ago, Palestinian terrorists attacked Israeli athletes during the Summer Olympics in Munich, Germany. My guest today is Ankie Spitzer, the widow of Andrei Spitzer, who was murdered in the terror attack together with 10 other Israelis. Shalom, Ankie. Thanks for joining us.
Shalom, shalom, and thank you for having me.
Maybe you could please start to describe how you experienced those horrible days in September 1972.
Well, before the horrible days, we had very good days because I was so lucky that I could come with my husband to the Olympic Games. We had a small baby who was only 2 months old, but I'm originally from Holland, and I took the baby to my parents and to my brothers and sisters in Holland, and I joined Andrei in the Olympic Village. And I must tell you, the Olympic Village in Munich was exactly as it should be. You know, it was a very nice, relaxed atmosphere. Everybody was walking around, talking to each other. It didn't matter where you came from, what your color was, what your religion was. You know, everybody was intermingling. And it was a wonderful, wonderful experience because this was the dream of Andrei. He wanted to go to the Olympics because he said, there are no enemies, there are no borders. I can talk to everyone that I cannot talk to in Israel. So unfortunately, after these wonderful 2 weeks that we had, the last 2 weeks together, then we were faced with this terrible tragedy. And we saw in the morning that terrorists came into the Olympic Village and entered the buildings and the apartments where the Israelis were living. And
but you were not in the village at that time, or?
No. We went 2 days before the attack. We understand that our baby was in the hospital because she was crying 24 hours a day. And I said to Andrei, you know, I have been here with you, but and now your competitions are over. I have to go immediately back to Holland. And he said, I'm coming with you too. And he came with me, and we were 2 days in Holland, and we saw that we spoke to the doctors. They said she probably is crying because of all the stress and the excitement before you went to the Olympics. She will be okay. We did all the tests on her. And then Andrei had to go back because they told him that he can go only for 2 days. Then we went to the train station. I took him to the train station, and he was supposed to take the train. It's about 11 hours from where my parents lived in Holland. And he missed the train because he still wanted me to stop on the way to the train station in front of the hospital so that he could embrace and kiss the baby for the last time. He didn't know that it was going to be for the last time. But when we got to the train station, the train was gone. So he said, oh, well, nothing I can do about it. I have another day with you and with the baby. I said, no, because you're going to get into trouble. They only gave you 2 days holiday. So I drove him to the next station in Holland, 30 kilometers, and hoping to find the train still in the station. And when we got there, we ran inside. Then 50 years ago, you still could open the doors of the train by yourself, you know. So the train was there. We opened it, he jumped in, and the train went. And I was running next to the train, and he was saying, I will get there at night, and I will call you when I got there safely. So I went back to the hospital to be with the baby, and I was very happy that he did catch the train. Then he called me when he arrived after 11 hours in Munich and at midnight, and he said, well, I arrived safely, and I was so happy. And I said, where are all your teammates? He said they went to a performance of Fiddler on the Roof, but they should be coming home any minute now. And so they did, and they were sitting around and they were talking to each other till around 2 o'clock in the morning. And then everybody went to his own apartments and went to sleep. And then only 2.5 hours later, the terrorists came in, and they already met one of the Israelis, Moshe Weinberg, in front of the building, and they already shot him through his face. And they asked him, where are the other Israelis? And he took them to the third apartment, because in the third apartment, there were all the strong guys, you know, the weightlifters, the wrestlers, and everything.
Yeah.
But what could they do? You know, they were in bed, they just fell asleep in their underwear. And, you know, there are 8 terrorists with Kalashnikovs and hand grenades. So they took all these strong guys to the first building where Andrei was, and they were kept hostage there for 21 hours in Andrei's room. You know, I only got the message that there was an attack in the morning at 7 o'clock, and I jumped out of my bed. I was in the house of my parents, and they had the Dutch television, the German television, the radio, and I tried to follow what was happening in Munich. And it was terrible, because the terrorists said, if we do not get 236 prisoners out of the Israeli prisons, we are going to start killing the Israelis one by one, starting at 12 o'clock noon. So then it is almost 12 o'clock, and you think, are they now going to shoot somebody, and maybe they're going to shoot Andrei? And then they said, okay, the ultimatum is going to be at 3. And then it was at 5. And every time you die a little bit, because you're afraid that they're going to take him and to shoot him or any of his teammates, of course. Then at 5:30, I suddenly saw, like everybody else on television, you know, we saw that at the second floor, the curtain was opened and the window was opened, and suddenly I saw Andrei in front of the window, and he was with his hands tied behind his back, and a terrorist was standing next to him. He spoke German, so they asked him, the people, all the officials, the German Minister of Interior, and everybody was there, and they asked him a few questions. Of course, I could not hear the questions, but I could see him. Afterwards, I asked, what did they ask him? And they said, we asked him, what is the situation inside the room? And is everybody still okay? And when Andrei, he said, everybody is okay except for one. And when they asked him, who is the one and what happened to him? He wanted to say that it was Josef Romano, you know, who was murdered and in front of his teammates, but he could not say it. They pushed him back into the room with the Kalashnikov. They closed the window, they closed the curtain. And that was really the last time I saw my husband, Andrei. But at least I knew that he was still alive. So I was still hopeful that I would see him again.
How old were you at the time?
I was 26. Andrei was 27. We were a young married couple. You know, we were only married for 1 year and 3 months. And we had this lovely baby girl, only 2 months old, you know, and we were on top of the world, because it was his dream to go to the Olympics. And it was my privilege that I could be there to see his dream come true. Nobody expected that this would ever happen. And, you know, the whole situation was horrible, because, you know, Germany did not prevent this attack. And they had prior warning 2 weeks beforehand. They had many warnings that something is going to happen, but they didn't do anything about it. And then they did not protect the Israeli athletes in the Olympic Village. And Israel they were offering them help, you know, because Israel had more experience with hostage situations and everything. So they offered help, and they refused, the Germans. They said, no, we can handle this thing, you know, on German soil, and we don't allow any military on our soil, blah, 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 you know. And then they were too arrogant to accept that help. And then at the end, you know, they had a rescue plan, which was already doomed before they even started it. And I said to them afterwards, I said, I understand in a situation like this, when everybody is firing, Palestinians and a few German sharpshooters and everything, that 1 or 2 people get killed. But all of them, you did not even save one Israeli. You saved 3 Palestinian terrorists this year, but not even one. So they totally failed also in their rescue attempt. And, you know, I tried for 5 decades to get information to understand what happened. In what helicopter was Andrei? Did he explode, get burned to death, or was he in the other helicopter, who were all shot? And then they said, what difference does it make? The German officials. I said, maybe not to you, but I have the right to know what happened to my husband. I have a baby girl, and one day I will have to tell her what happened. I would never be able to answer her question. You didn't do anything, Mom. You just sat there and continue with your life. And the German authorities, they never gave us the documents. They said there is nothing. And I said, believe me, I'm from Holland. I'm your neighbor. And I know exactly that Germans, they document every single little detail. So don't tell me that you don't have it. I said, I want the ballistic reports. I want the pathological reports. I want the investigation report. And they just said that they have nothing. And this went on for tens and tens of years. They were abusing me, humiliating me, sending me home and telling me, go take care of your daughter. What are you bothering us here? There's these officials that I was dealing with in the 70s and in the 80s and even in the 90s. They were all Germans that still had their feet in the dark past of Germany, not to say another word, So they couldn't care less. They only wanted to continue with their happy games. They wanted to take it out of the Olympic Village and put them all on a way back little airport in the dark, so that they could continue with their games, because this really bothered them, this incident, as if the Israeli athletes wanted this, it's unbelievable. And their attitude until today, 50 years later, is unbelievable. We asked, now it's the 50th anniversary, Konrad, and we asked the German president, who we respect very much, the German president, because he really tried to help us. And we asked him three things. I said, we want you, as the president of Germany, to make a public apology and to take responsibility for all the mishandling and all the mistakes that you make. And he agreed to do that. And I said, the second thing is that I want you to open all the archives and get all the documents out, so that we will finally have an historic perspective of what happened there. All the deals that Germany made with all kinds of Arab or the terror organizations and all kinds of countries like Libya and so on, This has to come out. People have to know about this, And he also agreed, President Steinmeier, to open all the archives. And the third thing I said, we finally also, after all these years, because for us it was the most important thing, the commemoration, that the world would not forget what happened in Munich, so that it would never happen again. And I said, we finally also want compensation. And he also agreed to the compensation. The only problem now is that they offered us such an insulting amount. At least I said, no, this, there is not one amount of money that can ever pay for the loss of Andrei. You cannot pay him in money. But at least, I said, there are 14 orphans. They have lived 50 years in the shadow of this massacre in Munich. They all have holes in their heart. I said, I am already 76 now. I was only 26 then. I don't need the diamond ring. I don't need any of the type. But I want the children finally to have a little bit of air. And you should pay us compensation according to international standards, because the attack in Munich was an international terror attack. And we checked the international law, and it says that international terror attack victims, they should be paid according to international standards. Take, for example, Lockerbie, where people were paid the international amount that they should get. And I said, we don't even need this, but make it dignified. I went to Israel's President Herzog, and I showed him what Germany is offering us. And he looked at it and he said, Ankie, this is a joke. I said, no, Mr. President, it's not a joke. It's an insult. And we are not taking insults again after 50 years. They should come up with a normal amount where you can say, okay, this is not a tip or a bone that you throw to a dog, No. And they're not willing to do that. And the only reason is, I tell you what the reason is. The money is not the problem in Germany, but they are afraid that if they will pay us a normal compensation, that they will have more claims from other people. They were mentioning to us that Greece, they still have a lot of complaints about and claims about the Second World War. I said, you did not settle that, what happened in the Second World War. I said, so deal with it, and it has nothing to do with us. Deal with us, and that's the end of it. And if everything would be okay, of course we would go, all the families would go to the Olympic memorial in Munich. Now we have cancelled it. Nobody is going. I don't know why they are going to have a memorial ceremony if we are not going to be there. We were supposed to go there, Konrad. It was a plane. There's more than 200 Israelis, the families, the Olympic Israeli athletes, the Olympic Committee, the Minister of Sport, and President Herzog with us. But President Herzog said, if the families are not going, I'm not going, and there will not be any Israeli at the ceremony, because they even couldn't do a closure for us, even after 50 years.
So that was planned now for the 5th of September?
Yes, they had two big memorial ceremonies planned, one in the Olympic Village and one at the airport where 9 of the Israelis were killed. And they worked on it for a year and a half, and they probably also spent a lot of money, but we told them, make closure with us, finish this after 50 years, and of course we will come. But now we have told them that we are not coming. We canceled the plane, we canceled the 150 hotel rooms in Munich, because I don't know what their problem is, really.
Yeah. It's really sad that Germany can mess up again and again and again in this case. And there was I understand that there was a memorial kind of service already the day after, during the Olympics, and you were there. Is that right?
Yes, I was there.
How did you experience that?
Surrealistic, let me tell you, because I went immediately after I heard that all of them were killed and all of them were murdered. I immediately took the first plane back to Munich, and I arrived there and I had to run because the ceremony started at 10 o'clock. And here I am running with one of the Israeli journalists who picked me up from the airport, and we are running, and I'm looking to the left and I'm looking to the right on the way to the stadium, to the Olympic Stadium. And there I see all kinds of athletes are training. And I said, can this be? Are these people training? And just now 11 members of the Olympic family have been murdered, and they are continuing training. And I got to the Olympic Stadium, and I was sitting there. And then I hear this Avery Brundage, the president then of the IOC. And he says, the games must go on. And I could not believe my ears. And I said, I have to do something, like the black athletes did in Mexico when they made this, this demonstration. I said, I have to do something, because how can he talk like this? But then I said, knowing Andrei, who was a peace-loving and very gentle person, he would not have wanted me to do anything. So I just sat there, and the whole speech of this Avery Brundage person was not about the victims. It was about Rhodesia. I many times I reheard this speech, and I said, what was the guy talking about? This is the memorial service. So afterwards, after the memorial service, we were asked to go back to the rooms. Those that survived, because there were a number of people that survived, they could escape. If they would go back to the rooms to pick up the personal belongings of their friends who were murdered. So I said, okay, I will go to Andrei's room, because I was there every day. And they said, no, you cannot go there, because that's where they were held hostage. That's where they murdered Josef Romano. It looks terrible there. I said, I will go, because I want to see where Andrei spent the last hours of his life. So I took one of his fencers with me. We went to the Connellystrasse 31. That's where his apartment was, the second floor. We opened the door and we looked inside. And inside the house, there was this round circle staircase. and we saw from that staircase already the blood was coming down. So the fencer said to me, Ankie, please do not go up there, because if it already looks here like this, what will it look upstairs? And I said, I do have to go. I have to see it. So I went upstairs, and I came into that room where they were held, they were all tied with their hands and their feet together on the bed and on the table, and one to the other. And, you cannot even explain the scene I saw there, because they shot Josef Romano. So there were big holes in the wall, and a lot of the wall came back into the room. Then they brought them food that they could not, nobody ate. It was all over the floor. The blood on the ceiling, everything was blooded. So I looked and I said to myself, how can people do this to each other?
Yeah.
How much hatred do you have to have inside of you to be able to come to the Olympic Village, which is the symbol of peace and brotherhood and friendship through sports? How can you do this? And I said, if this is what people did to each other, I'm not going to stop talking about it. And the world has to be reminded only for one reason, so that this will never, ever happen again.
Yeah.
And I just wondered how, and I looked around and I said, what can I take? The only thing that I found was the little mascot, which was, the symbol of the Olympic Games that Andrei bought for his little baby daughter. And actually, I have it right here. 1 second. Here, it is this thing. It was the little dog, that was the symbol. He bought it for our baby daughter, Anouk. That was the only thing that was without blood. And I took it, and we still have it 50 years later. And for the rest, I just closed the door and I said, this is unbelievable, unbelievable that people live with so much hatred.
Yeah. And what do you say and feel today when you see certain people in the Palestinian society celebrating the attackers as heroes?
Yeah, well, I don't get it, because I raised my daughter and also the other 14 orphans. We raised them without hatred in their hearts. It was the most important goal in my life to raise and educate my daughter without hatred. Of course, I said there were terrorists, they killed your father, but not all the Palestinians are like that. And definitely also not all the Arabs are like this. And I succeeded also with the other orphans. Nobody has hatred. But then if you hear all these other Palestinians that have no clue and that they are celebrating and happy, and even their president, doesn't think that he should say that, that sorry about it. It's unbelievable. But we do not hate. We do not, of course, we do not accept the terrorists who killed our sons and our fathers and our husbands, but we do not hate the Palestinians. We do not hate the Arabs. And I wish they would not hate us so much too,
Absolutely. Tell us a little bit more about Andrei, if you want. What was his background? Was he born in Israel, and what was his dream?
No, Andrei was not born in Israel, and neither am I, of course. But he was born in Transylvania, in the Hungarian part of Romania. And when he was 11 years old, his father died from cancer. So his mother raised him, and at the age of 18, she decided to come to Israel to give him a better future. So he came to Israel, and he immediately went into the army, in the Air Force, and he served his 3 years in the army. And at the same time, he was a fencer. So at the same time, also during his army, in the weekends when he was not in the army, then he would continue fencing, and he became a coach, and he became a very good coach. And then in Israel, they decided to send him 2 years to Holland in order to become the national coach. So he was sent for 2 years. And
that's
there
where
I
he met you?
him. Yes, I was a fencer myself, and he was my coach, and I had no clue that he was from Israel. He spoke very well Dutch, but with some accent, and I did not know where the accent came from. But I had spent before that, I had spent a year not connected to Andrei at all, in a kibbutz, like volunteering in a kibbutz, like many young people did in the end of the 60s, so I did so too. And I had this, Andrei was giving me, not only me, but all the other fencers, condition training. At one point, I was tired, and I said to myself, maspik. Maspik is a Hebrew word, which means enough, So that was one of the words I learned when I was in a kibbutz for a year, So, and then he stopped the condition training. He said, where do you know the word maspik from? I said, I was a year in Israel, and then said, I am from Israel. And he said, after the training, let's have a beer and tell me about your time in Israel. So we had the beer and we spoke and we kept speaking and we fell in love. And then he had to go back to Israel because his 2 years were up. And so I decided I'm going back with him. And we lived on a very small place, a fencing academy in the north of Israel on the Lebanese border. And it was very dangerous there because after 5 o'clock, we were not allowed to get out of our houses. And it was remote, and it was a fencing academy, and I was doing the same sports as everybody else, but I could not do the anatomy and all these lessons because I did not speak Hebrew at all. So I tell you, that year was the most wonderful year of my life. In this remote place, rather dangerous, but we were there together, and we had the best time of our lives.
Yeah. Did you have Jewish background yourself?
No. No. I was not born Jewish at all.
No. Yeah.
And I went to Israel, and I was not Jewish, and you cannot marry in Israel when you're not Jewish. So we went to Holland to get married, and then afterwards, I decided to convert. I said, if my life is going to be in Israel, then I might as well do this, and because otherwise it will be also very complicated. And so I did this. I must say, just a week before our daughter was born, I converted to. Andrei did not request this from me. He did not ask this from me, and he said, "You have to make your own decisions. You don't have to do it for me at all." I said, "No, I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it for myself." So that is the case.
Yes. So Ankie, I'm so glad that you took this time to tell about your life and your struggle, and we wish you all success in this battle with the German government. It's so sad to hear that they are still failing.
Yes. But I want to thank you, and I would like to tell you that I'm very impressed by your organization, because I also believe that people should get together, never mind their religious background, their political background. There's too much hatred and bad stuff going around, and we should get together. And that's the only solution. And it was an honor for me to be able to speak to you. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot. Shalom, litraot. Bye-bye.
Shalom, shalom. Bye-bye.